The Lifestyle Show, presented by Selina Mackenzie.
Now, Sam Kydd was a well-known, unsung British actor from 1946 to his death in 1982. Well, I'm delighted to say that I'm joined by his son, Jonathan, now, who's written all about him from a book called Never Mind the Acting, Just Say the Words. Welcome to the show, Jonathan.
Hello, lovely to be on it. How nice. Thank you.
He's very nice. Definitely unsung. I was reading that he was in more films than any other British actor.
Yes, he made over 290, and he was in hundreds and hundreds of tellies, and was a big celebrity, and much more of a celebrity than people realise, I think. But he's found a new lease of life on Talking Pictures TV, the station that shows all these old films, and he's on twice a week actually.
Oh, is he really?
Now started showing more of the television stuff he was in, because a lot of it was wiped, or they did it live. He was in from the very beginning of ITV and early on with the BBC. He made a point of trying to do it. He thought that was really just after making money, really. But he started off in 1953 being in Sam Weller on the BBC, and got great plaudits for that, and a very successful TV career ensued. But he'd been making films since 45. He was in The Captive Heart, and he'd been a prisoner of war, and he wrote a book about it called For You the War Is Over, that sold about 60,000 in 1973, and I've republished it, and it ticks over nicely. It's a fantastic story and would make a very good stage play, actually, which I'm contemplating making it into a stage play coming up. I've got lots of plans for doing stuff that he's done. I'm trying to do a documentary about him, which is proving difficult because, of course, everybody who worked with him are no longer with us, or if he did work with them, they were children when he did work with them. I've actually written a couple of books. I used his. He wrote an autobiography after he'd written the Prisoner of War book, which was never published, and the reason was that I think it overcame him, actually, because it was such an enormous project, because he made so much work that in the middle of the book I remember it just being a whole series of lists of stuff that he was in, which is a bit dull, as you can imagine. But my mother kept all his archive in the loft of the family home, and during COVID I wrote the first volume using his autobiography as the kind of core, with some fantastic stories. And there was an archive in the loft of lots of diaries and lots of little family moments that he'd written down on backs of cardboard that you used to stiffen shirts with the dry cleaners, or even on betting slips. He liked a bit of a bet, my dad. And little stories here and there, that I added into the book, and that was the first book. And I've set up a publishing company, and I've sold about 2,000 of that one. And this one has been out a few weeks, and I'm doing a book launch in Putney in London, just coming up on June 15th. So I'm sort of gearing myself to selling a few. I've had a decent print run of it, but it's similarly a very interesting book. Goes from 53 to 58, and he was in a mass of tellies and a mass of films, of course, as well, because he made 119 films from 1945 to 52, and 53 to 58, I think he must have been in another 100, and with mass, as I say, tellies. And the advantage from my dad, if people wouldn't know what he was like, well, he played Irishmen and Cockneys, and
yes, I believe, yeah.
He was born in Belfast, so he could speak. His family lived in Chiswick. We went round there. It was like going back into a little Belfast. I'd go in and he'd change my dad. My dad spoke like me. He'd been to Dunstable Grammar, and he was just very good with accents. He'd been an impressionist before the war, something I never knew. And we walk into this house in Chiswick, and he'd suddenly go, "Hello, mother, how are you there? How are you?" and he'd go, "I'm not bad, stranger." She'd say, "Stranger," even though I'd been round there a week before, and he spoke to her every day on the phone. And his uncle would appear, and his uncle had a very strange voice like that, very sort of posh Belfast accent. And then he would come out and he'd speak to somebody. He'd say, "Go into the garage," and I'd been with him. And he was a bit of a chameleon, and he'd speak a bit like that, my dad. He'd speak a bit, because that's what he could do. He did play lots of Cockneys.
That's
he would play the Cockney with the Cockney with the Heart of Gold, my dad always played. He was in Dixon of Dock Green was a big series, which in fact they've been showing on Talking Pictures. There was an episode that he did, and he was in every single series, because Jack Warner was a mate, but he always played the burglar with the Heart of Gold, my dad.
Yeah, he was always classed as a crook, wasn't he? He was always cast as a crook, I believe.
Well, it veered in different eras of his career. Actually, there was a period where he imposed it upon himself. In fact, it's in this 1953 to 58 book. Never mind the acting, just say the words. Where because he did a series of Ministry of Information films about how to. He played a character called Fred the Burglar, who encouraged members of the public to, leave their doors open or not tell the milkman that they were going on holiday, so the milk piled up. So he would know there was nobody in, and he would then burgle the house. And then the commissioner for police came on and said, "Don't pay any attention to this man. He's a burglar." and they were so popular. He made 6 of them, so popular, and that he was stopped by people in the street. They said, "Hello, Fred. Burgled any good houses recently?" And was also occasionally stopped by the police.
Oh no!
As a consequence, yeah. Who kept? "I recognise you," and "I think you ought to come down the station with me." And my mum would say, "No, he's an actor. He's in all those ads," and they wouldn't believe them. Mum, actually, I remember. But so that sort of, for a period, he was known as, there was a huge press that went with that. He was known as Fred, and he played burglars. But before that, he'd played lots of the period up to then. He played masses of members of the armed forces, masses of soldiers, masses of sailors, masses of Air Forcemen. He was in a fantastic film called Appointment in London, playing an RAF man with Dirk Bogarde, who he worked with about 7 times in a row, and then became my godfather. Oh. And I never met him.
Oh, what a shame! What a shame! Yeah, he was in They Who Dare with Dirk Bogarde, wasn't he?
Indeed, absolutely. Big film, 4 months away, and that's at the beginning of the book. He thought he was going to be a great. Thought that might be his passport to stardom, my dad, because he had a big part in that. But the film wasn't a big success. And when you analyse what he wrote about it, my dad, you could see why it wasn't a success, because the director, who was the great Lewis Milestone, who directed the Great World War One film. I can't remember the name of it. My mind has gone blank. But people would remember that it was a great black and white film that had been a huge, big international success. Oh my goodness, can't remember. Anyway,
I can't help.
I find these things, they flick in and out. Otherwise I'm sort of encyclopedic about some of these things, but they disappear. It'll come back to me in a minute, actually, and I'll blurt it out at you. But he'd made this great film, but he clearly sort of made it up. The director made the script up on the day, because they did that terrible thing which you never want to do to actors, which is, being an actor myself, is if you say, we haven't got a couple of scenes here, all the actors then go away and start writing the scenes and writing themselves up in them. And I remember my dad, having been told that they didn't know what they were doing the following day, but it was vaguely on the lines of the script they'd been given, but he didn't like it. But everybody would write scenes, and they'd come prepared to give the director their version of the scene, which, of course, as I say, had them in it. But the very fact that the whole of the film was based on other people providing bits of script didn't seem to go down. In the end, they edit together very well. But
how did he actually become an actor? Because I believe his mother wanted him to become a newsagent.
Oh, completely. Madness of the family. They wanted him to have a respectable job. They wanted he worked in Whiteley's in London for a period, and she was very keen on him becoming working in the bed department, I think. She was always keen on something that she felt she'd have an angle on. He might get cheap beds or something. Or then she said, could he'd work in the food hall in Harrods, because I think she liked smoked salmon, so he could get the odd would come her way. But it was something, they just wanted a job with a pension. They just felt they were from an era where being an actor was disreputable, and they didn't think that he would make a success. But he, despite her, he'd been an impressionist and MC, a master of ceremonies before the Second World War. at the Hammersmith Palais and in Scarborough with Bud Flanagan. So he'd been quite successful, and his aim was to, keep going with this. And the war sort of helped him bizarrely, because he was in shows and put on cabarets despite being a prisoner of war. This is when I think it was better for them after a couple of years, and the Germans allowed them to put on entertainments. And he wrote a lot and appeared in lots of farces. It was like his repertory company. And then in Chiswick, when he was in Chiswick living in his mother's home, he answered an advertisement in the Chiswick Herald for advisors wanted for this film called The Captive Heart, which was set in a prison camp. And bizarrely, having been coming out from a prison camp in Germany and in Poland as he was, and saying he never wanted to go back to Germany or have anything to do with Germany, within 3 months he's back in a prison camp as an advisor, but then also he was in it. In fact, he's the only, there were about 20 advisors. He thought it was just going to be him, but there are about 20. And he's the only one who's actually in the film, and he's got lines, because he obviously impressed them. And he used that as a basis with the stills to getting further work. And in fact, that's in the first volume. And the second volume, it's him thinking that They Who Dare will be the passport to success. And then I won't give spoiler alert, but it's not what he thinks it's going to be, but he still has from there. I mean, immediately after in the book, they think he's in one film where he lies about being able to ride a horse, and from then on, people keep asking him, "Oh, be in my horse racing film," despite never being happy about riding a horse.
Oh, it's incredible! It sounds like such fun. And did you say that you followed in his footsteps?
Yeah, I'm an actor too, but I'm rather invisible as an actor, because I've done masses of voice work. I've been in Toy Story. I've just done Mr. Bean, the cartoon. I've just done up 30 voices in that. I've inherited his ability to do silly voices. Aww. And and I've written a book called Go Quicker, Sound Slower, which is an advantage of publishing my father's books, is that I can publish my own book as well, you see.
Yes,
so my publishing called Squid, Squydd, because it's Kydd and Squid, you see. It's a nickname I had when I was in a band about 30 years ago.
Oh, amazing. Well, sadly, we're out of time. We've only just touched the tip of the iceberg, but the book is packed with information about Sam's career when ICV had just started, and they paid better than the BBC. Crikey. The book is called Never Mind the Acting, Just Say the Words. It's by Jonathan Kydd, who's Sam's son, and it's out now. Jonathan, do you have a website as well if people want to find out more about you?
I do. Lovely, thank you. JonathanKydd.com. That's JonathanKydd.com. You'll see lots of my silly videos, stuff that I've made, and also lots of my voices and the acting parts I've done as well, because I've done some decent stuff on television and made a few films as well. So,
fabulous.
Thank you. Yeah. So he's also got a website called samkydd.com.
Oh, okay.
Which is really interesting, though I say so myself, having put it together. But, yeah.
Bless you. Thanks for sharing all about your dad, Jonathan. Take care now.
And you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.